Hello and welcome. Have you ever stopped and wondered why people, and let's be honest, sometimes it's us, can look at a truth, a fact, something staring us right in the face, and then just turn away? Well, today we're going to explore exactly that. We're diving into the psychology of denial, but through a lens you might not expect, a really powerful case study from a classic text, the Quran. Okay, let's get into it.
Now, right out of the gate, the source material hits us with this core idea, and I want you to really let this sink in. It frames denial not as some passive mistake, not just ignorance, but as an active skill. It's a set of mental gymnastics that people learn and practice, all to protect their own comfort. And that idea, that it's a choice, is going to be our guide through this whole explainer.
But before we even get to the how of denial, the text does something really clever. It sets the stage by basically removing every single excuse from the table. It says, look, nobody is being asked to do more than they can handle. No one is being judged unfairly. The record is true. And this is so important, right? Because it establishes that denial isn't born from some injustice. It's a choice made on a totally level playing field.
So, with that foundation of fairness locked in, how does this active skill of denial actually work? What does it look like in practice? Let's move to our first section and really break down the mechanics people use to actively dodge the truth. The very first tactic is captured by this incredible Arabic word, ghamra. It literally means to be submerged, to be drowned. See, the problem isn't that there's a lack of evidence, it's that there's an overabundance of distraction. People get so immersed in their busyness, in entertainment, in all these other pursuits, that when their conscience tries to speak up, they just turn the volume up on everything else and drown it out.
And this slide, wow, this just nails a fundamental human dynamic, doesn't it? When life is comfortable, when everything's going our way, it is so easy to ignore inconvenient truths. The source points out how the well-off can just brush off warnings, but the second a crisis hits, the moment there's real pain, they suddenly, as the source puts it so vividly, remember heaven's customer support line.
And that's the absolute key. The people being described here, they didn't lack access to the truth. The verses were right there, presented to them. But instead of engaging, they literally turned back on their heels. And I love this metaphor the source uses. Progress was offered, but they moonwalked away. They actively went in reverse, away from the truth.
This is such a sharp insight. Think about it. How do you make that retreat feel okay? You do it with other people. The text talks about them gathering at night for mockery and private jokes. Denial becomes a team sport. By making the truth the punchline, you create this social shield. It gets shot down in the group chat long before it's ever seriously considered as an intellectual argument.
All right, so now that we've seen the tactics, the drowning out, the moonwalking, the social mockery, let's look at the justifications. This next part is kind of like a cross-examination, where the text just systematically dismantles the common excuses people use for their denial.
And the first excuse is taken down with this simple, but honestly, devastating question. Have they not even stopped to think about it? This points to just a basic failure to even engage their own mind, to reflect. The first line of defense is simply not thinking.
Okay, so if that first excuse doesn't hold up, what's plan B? Well, it's pretending you don't know any better. The text asks, or did they not know their messenger? But the source is really clear here. Oh, they knew him. They knew his character, his history, his integrity. So this isn't genuine confusion. The source calls it exactly what it is, selective amnesia.
And when all else fails, what's the last resort? It's classic character assassination. If you can't argue with the message, you just attack the messenger. By claiming the person bringing the truth is crazy, you give yourself the perfect out. You can dismiss everything they say without ever having to actually deal with the substance of it. But the text just slices right through that final excuse. This comparison on the slide just lays it all out. The excuse they give is madness. But what's the reality? The reality is that most of them are averse to the truth. And that's the whole game right there. The rejection isn't intellectual, it's emotional. The truth isn't being dismissed because it's unclear. It's being dismissed because it's inconvenient.
And that brings us right to the heart of it all, the absolute core of the conflict, the fundamental battle that really drives all denial, the epic clash between objective truth and our own personal desires.
And this is where the stakes just get cosmic. The text doesn't just say it would be a bad idea for truth to bend to our whims. It says that if reality itself reshaped to fit every single person's desire, the entire system, the heavens, the earth, everything, would fall into chaos and corruption. The source calls this cosmic sabotage. Truth has to be a fixed point, otherwise the whole universe unravels. So the message is presented as a straight path, not some confusing maze. It's clear, which means any deviation, any wandering off that path, has to be intentional. And what's the root cause? The text links it directly to not believing in the hereafter. I mean, if you remove the idea of ultimate accountability, your moral compass just naturally starts to drift. The path is still straight, but you're choosing to walk off of it.
So what happens when this active denial, all these excuses and this intentional wandering just keeps going, unchecked? Well, that brings us to our final section, the consequences. Because, as the source material reminds us, the bill always, always comes due.
The text lays out this really chilling three-step process. First, mercy is shown, maybe a hardship is lifted, but instead of gratitude, it just fuels their arrogance. They keep going. Second, a punishment is sent, a wake-up call, but they still don't humble themselves. The source calls this a state of spiritual numbness. And then finally, a gate of severe consequence swings open, and in that moment, all the arguments, all the jokes, all the excuses are gone, and all that's left is despair.
And that right there is the ultimate tragedy of this whole story. The final stage isn't even fear or anger. It's this quiet, hollow despair of someone who has run out of exits, run out of evasions. The tragedy isn't really the punishment itself. It's that gut-wrenching realization of how completely and totally avoidable it all was.
So let's just pull this all together. What have we seen? We've seen that denial isn't an accident. It's an active process with a whole skill set. The truth is heard, but it's skillfully dodged. Comfort is used as a tool to put off any serious thinking. A crisis might trigger a moment of panic, but it doesn't lead to real change. And underneath it all is this one powerful demand, that reality itself should bend to our desires.
You know, I think this final thought from the source material just perfectly captures everything we've talked about. The truth stands on its own. It doesn't need to win a debate, it simply is. This whole active process of denial, it's not about defeating the truth. It's about making the personal choice to just abandon the argument altogether.
And so that really leaves us with one last question to think about in our own lives. When we justify our actions, when we explain why we did or didn't do something, what is the real, honest-to-goodness difference between a genuine reason and a well-crafted excuse? Thank you so much for joining me.